Good morning and welcome. My name is Annette Lovell and I am your worship associate today. We are bringing the service today with Reverend Kevin Carson and our media technician, Vic Allen. We are a spiritual community that supports choice. We choose to gather in a sanctuary on Sunday mornings or watch our services streaming online, or choose to get our spiritual nourishment from friends, or walking in the nature, or meditation, or just staying put with our nose in a book. We choose to fight for others through social justice and activism, or choose to protect our sanity by wrapping a bit of a blanket around ourselves and just trying not to create pain to others, but striving for inner peace. We choose to believe in a higher power in countless forms and ideas, or choose to believe in nothing outside the miraculous nature of ourselves and humankind and nature. We choose through our democratic practice what to stand behind as an organized religion, even if it may not be exactly what your personal choices are. We have myriad choices to make every day, and this spiritual place tries to support each of us individually along the way. So thank you for choosing to be with us today. We are blessed by your presence, and all are welcome. And it's good to see some new faces and some faces we have not seen for quite a while. So really welcome. We'd like to start our service with a few announcements. First of all, if you're joining us online today, you can choose to make a special note in the chat box and say hello. We are very blessed to be able to provide online streaming, though there might be some technical difficulties today, so we're sorry if there is. Here in the sanctuary, joys and concerns are still being written on a piece of paper. They are in the back of the sanctuary. Please feel free to grab a piece of paper and write your joys or concerns or sorrows. If you're online, put them in the chat box and we will gather them from there. The women's group will be meeting this Friday, October 7th at 5:30 at Cindy Logan's house. Please bring a dish to share and a desire for good vibes and conversation. All are welcome there. Next Sunday, October 9th, will be our first potluck after the church service since COVID shut us down. So you can bring any dish to share. This will take place instead of our regular just coffee hour. There will also be a take-apart party during the social hour. Broken electronics and tools will be provided, so you just need to bring your curiosity and let's look inside some of the technology that we use. I was told this morning root beer floats are being served if you need an extra, little oomph to get there. Are there any other announcements I'm unaware of? Okay, so let us prepare for worship with just a few moments to sit quietly, and listen to the ringing of the peace bowl. I will strike it 3 times. We covenant together each Sunday, striving to be better humans in relationships with ourselves and with each other. So please recite the words that you'll find in your order of service with me this morning. Love is the spirit of this community, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And our chalice lighting this morning is brought to us from Mary Austin. If you're at home with us today, please light a flame along with us. She writes, I arise facing east. I am asking towards the light. I am asking that my day shall be beautiful with light. I am asking that the place where my feet are shall be light. That as far as I can see, I shall follow it aright. I am asking for the courage to go forward through the shadow. I am asking toward the light.
Good morning. Our call to worship this morning is the poem Forgiveness by John Greenleaf Whittier. My heart was heavy, for its trust had been abused, its kindness answered with foul wrong. So turning gloomily from my fellow men, one summer Sabbath day I strolled among the green mounds of the village burial place, where pondering how all human love and hate find one sad level, and how soon or late, wronged and wrongdoer, each with meekened face and cold hands folded over a still heart, past the green threshold of our common grave, whither all footsteps tend, whence none depart. Awed for myself and pitying my race, our common sorrow, like a mighty wave, swept all my pride away, and trembling, I forgave. I invite you now to please rise in body or spirit and join in singing our opening hymn, number 205, Amazing Grace.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. 'Twas blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace that brought me safe and sound, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when
all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, to the rest of the universe atomically.
I think nature's imagination is so much greater than man's. He's never gonna let us
We live in an in-between universe where things change alright, but according to patterns, rules, or as we call them, laws of
I'm
nature.
this guy standing on a planet. Really, I'm just a speck. I'm just a speck compared with a star. The planet is just another speck to think about.
Today's Time for All Ages is A Circle of Forgiveness by Reverend Dr. Emily Brault from Heeding the Call in Tapestry of Faith, read by Elizabeth Coyote, Director of Lifespan Faith Development. Reverend Dr. Emily Brault is a Unitarian Universalist minister who works as a chaplain with the Oregon State Correctional Department. Prior to her current position working with incarcerated, she worked at a juvenile correctional. This is one story of forgiveness that inspired her along the way. While I was working at a juvenile correctional facility, I met a 15-year-old boy. We'll call him Jeremy. Jeremy was in prison for breaking into a church and stealing money. It was a random church. He didn't know anybody there, had never gone there, but it was an easy mark and he needed the money. Who knows what for. Toward the end of his sentence, Jeremy had the chance to participate in a restorative justice service. It turned out that some of the people at the church wanted to meet him. They wanted to hear his side of the story. Why did you do it? Why us? And they wanted to tell their side of the story too. How did Jeremy affect the church? How did he affect the people in the church? I was one of the people who helped Jeremy get ready for his circle. At first, Jeremy didn't understand why the people would be mad at him. He said, "It's not like I stole from somebody in particular. The church can always get more money. It's not like it's somebody's money." I tried to explain it to him like this. Imagine that you have two piles of money. One pile is for yourself, for things that you want, maybe a bike or a stereo. And the other pile is for your grandpa. Maybe you're saving money for your grandpa because he needs surgery or he needs glasses. And you've been saving money for him for a long time. So now imagine these two piles of money, and I'm going to take one of them from you. Should I take your money, or should I take the money that you've been saving for your grandpa? Jeremy decided I should take his money. When I asked him why, he said, "Because I can always get those things later, but my grandpa needs my help." "Well, Jeremy," I said, "when you stole from the church, you stole money that people gave so that they could help other people. So you didn't just steal from one person, you stole from a pile of money that was meant to help many people, maybe people like your grandpa." Jeremy was very nervous about meeting the people he had stolen from, but he wanted the chance to apologize to them. He was very scared about what they would say, though. Would they hate him? Would they yell at him? He had no idea how they would react, but he wanted to apologize, and he had the courage it took to listen to whatever the people in the church needed to say to him. I met with Jeremy the day after the circle. He was so happy and energetic. When I got there, he said, I was really nervous. All these people were there. The pastor was there, and like 5 different people from the church, and we all just went around the table and talked. They told me how I had hurt them and how they were still struggling with feeling safe in their church. Some of the people cried. I felt so bad. I cried too. I told them everything, what I was thinking, why I did it, and I apologized. I apologized for being selfish and for thinking only of me and for never thinking about how I might affect other people. I wish I could take it back. I wish I could live that night over and make different choices, but I can't. All I can do is say, I'm sorry. And after it was over, some of the people gave me hugs. I don't think I've ever cried so much, Chaplain. I can't believe they gave me a hug. They forgave me. Jeremy was a different person after that. Something changed in him, something big and important. He talked about his experience in that circle for months. He talked to other guys in the prison. He talked about choices and responsibility. He talked about how our actions affect others even when we don't know it. And he talked about how grateful he felt that he had a chance to say he was sorry and start again. I lost touch with Jeremy after he got out, but he will always impress me. I hope that church was as transformed by the circle as he was. May we all have the courage to face our hurts with gentleness and hope. The end.
And before we sing out the children, I should mention that we've had a couple of people sick this week, including Elizabeth, who recorded that, and Jessica's been on voice rest, so she was kind enough to record the instrumentals for us this morning. So we hope everyone starts feeling better, and I've been fighting a cold myself, so it's just one of those things going around. But I believe Catherine is going to now escort the children, so we'll now sing out the children.
So it's time for our joys and concerns. We have a concern, but it's just anonymous. It says all of those suffering and pain, all of those suffering about finances. We light a candle. Pam has a joy. Welcome first-time visitors. Yeah. Cindy has a joy and a concern. Rob has just begun a journey to South Dakota to meet up with his brother and ride motorcycles. Always a dangerous adventure, but full of adventure. So, I hope he has fun. And Lila has a concern. B. Moyer. Oh, Layla, I'm so sorry, Layla. Ugh, after all these years, I don't know why I said that. Jeez, can't read. B. Moyer is at Lincoln Court, and she could use some visitors. So, are there any joys and concerns in the chat box? Okay, we will light one more candle to represent all of those joys, concerns, and sorrows we choose not to share today.
Our reading this morning comes from the book 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life by Karen Armstrong. Martin Luther King Jr. believed that the highest point of Jesus' life was the moment when he forgave his executioners, when instead of attempting to defeat evil with evil, he was able to prevail over it with good. Only goodness can drive out evil, and only love can overcome hate. Loving our enemies means that we have to accept the necessity over and over again of forgiving those who inflict evil and injury upon us. King was convinced that this was an absolute necessity for our survival, the key to the solution of the problems of our world. We could not allow the injury our enemies inflicted upon us to become an insuperable barrier to a more positive relationship. We must not seek to defeat or humiliate the enemy, but to win his friendship and understanding, King insisted. Every word and deed must contribute to an understanding with the enemy and release those vast reservoirs of goodwill which have been blocked by the impenetrable walls of hate. But compassion involves risk and makes us vulnerable. King was assassinated in 1968. He knew that hatred was inspired by fear, but always remained convinced that only love could cure this disease. Hatred paralyzes life. Love releases it. Hatred confuses life. Love harmonizes it. Even though King fell victim to hatred, his commitment to compassion changed the world, and his memory remains a constant inspiration. An offering to support the mission of this church will now be given and gratefully received. If you were paying close attention to the lyrics of our opening hymn this morning, Amazing Grace, you may have noticed the asterisk which our hymnal places in the middle of the first verse next to the word wretch. The footnote says you could consider substituting the word soul instead. Which did you choose this morning? Did you feel more like a wretch or a soul? A few years ago, I ran across a wonderful short essay on this peculiar asterisk by Victoria Safford in her book, Walking Toward Morning Meditations. And she makes the following observation. I know of no other hymnal in print that virtually stops the singing in mid-measure to poll the congregation, to call for a theological debate within the mind and heart of every singer. And right there, you have to stake your claim, make your mark, testify, all the while wondering if the person singing next to you will take offense if you confess at the top of your voice your own wretchedness and even our common condition as a fallen, faulty species. Or will your neighbor be annoyed or maybe shocked if you stand there warbling on about what a pleasant soul you are, what a nice, well-rounded, fully individuated, sin-free, guilt-free, humanist soul. There you stand, frozen in time, and the music plays on while you hastily cobble a theology. Her point is worthy of serious consideration despite the obvious humor. As our Unitarian Universalist faith evolved away from traditional Christianity over the last couple of centuries, we became less focused on sin and forgiveness and the idea of salvation that is so central to mainstream Christian teachings. These days it would be very unusual to hear a preacher in one of our congregations say that we are all sinners in need of forgiveness in order to get right with God. Long ago, we abandoned the idea that our salvation was purchased by the death of Jesus Christ, the blood of the Lamb that is extolled in so many old gospel hymns. And we have disavowed many of the so-called sins which the self-righteous have so freely decried to instill guilt, shame, and pain in the lives of others. We do not condemn people because of their sexual identity. We do not blame women for the fall of humanity from God's favor. We do not excommunicate those who get divorced or have children outside of marriage or get an abortion. We do not condemn those who question religious teachings. Indeed, questioning is one of the foundations of our faith. Many of our neighbors are not so fortunate. And in some cases, being told over and over how unworthy they are can for years can even be traumatic. I read an article on the CNN website recently that described the so-called rapture trauma that plagues some evangelical Christians. They're taught they must always be right with God because the rapture could come at any moment, taking the righteous up to heaven, and they wouldn't want to be left behind. It reminds me of the Puritans in the 17th century who obsessed over whether they were among the elect, who could only be saved by the grace of God according to Calvinist doctrine. Ruminating on one's unworthiness in the eyes of some God seems a tragic waste of time and detrimental to a life well lived. But while I believe our theology has evolved in a very good direction, I wonder sometimes if, in our emphasis on the essential goodness of humankind, we haven't lost something along the way. I wonder if we adequately acknowledge the negative emotions and the human capacity for evil, the darkness that lurks inside the hearts of every person. And if we don't, what does this imply for how we respond to the inevitable harm that we will cause and the hurt that others will inflict upon us? Do we even have a recognizable theology of forgiveness? This question has been on my mind a lot in recent days after learning about a former colleague who I know who was arrested a couple of weeks ago for sexual misconduct. In traditional Christian churches where faith is grounded in the brokenness and sinfulness of human beings, it is not uncommon to see pastors fall from grace in very public ways at times, and yet they are often forgiven and reinstated for better or worse. Despite our frequent affirmation of love and acceptance of one another, I think that there's less room in our faith for this kind of forgiveness in such terrible situations. It is something we must unfortunately wrestle with when things like this happen, though I honestly can't imagine anyone continuing in UU ministry afterward for very good reasons. As you may know, in the Jewish liturgical calendar, we are between the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, which was last week, and the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, which begins Tuesday evening, the highest holy days in the Jewish tradition. So I think it is an especially good time to think about forgiveness. In 2017, my friend and colleague, Reverend Liz Lerner McClay, who now serves the First Unitarian Church in Providence, Rhode Island, wrote a nice article in UU World about the basics of Yom Kippur and the importance of the holy day for her as a UU raised in a family with a strong Jewish cultural identity. She said, "Jewish theology holds that forgiveness has to happen on the mortal plane between individuals before any larger or divine forgiveness can take place. This is a big deal because of the high holy days beginning with the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, and ending with the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, when tradition holds that all people are judged by God as to whether they deserve another year written into the book of life. Forgiveness is required in order to be in good standing, pardoned or absolved of guilt. Forgiveness is not optional. It is critical. Your life literally depends on it. Not surprisingly, this means there's a lot in Jewish tradition and practice about forgiveness. Perhaps the most important point, according to the Jewish system, is that the onus to invoke forgiveness is on the wrongdoer, not the wronged. The wrongdoer must take all these steps with the actual person they hurt. It's not enough to process it oneself, resolve to make it up in ways we think make sense, or to talk it over with a therapist or other confessor. In Judaism, no absolution can take place unless the admission and atonement happens with the person who suffered the wrong. The human dimension of this model is also critical. So it's also so critical that ultimate forgiveness, the kind that gets people written into the book of life for another year in every Jewish New Year, can't even begin to happen until we've made things right on the mortal plane with a person we've hurt. This is true no matter what. No matter how much we go to worship or pray privately, no matter how many good deeds we do to atone or outweigh the wrong, there's no access to larger forgiveness. Here's another kicker. We're not off the hook unless the person we wronged says we are. In other words, if we wrong someone and go through the steps of admitting it to them, asking truly for their forgiveness, and asking to make it up to them somehow, they can say no. They can refuse to forgive us and refuse to allow us to make it up to them. As the article continues, she describes how she has incorporated Yom Kippur into her Unitarian Universalist spiritual practices as what she calls a discipline of forgiveness. She makes a point around this time of year to reach out to those she feels she wronged in some way during the previous year, to ask forgiveness. She's not worried about being written into the book of life, but she believes it is a practice that simply makes her a better person. Being human means that we will inevitably endure pain and inflict pain on others in some way. And some wounds are so deep that forgiveness seems to be too much to ask of someone. The lawsuits brought by Sandy Hook families against Alex Jones have been in the news a lot lately. And when you think about a horror like the massacre of 20 young children and 6 adults at an elementary school, it breaks your heart and can easily shatter your faith in humanity. And Jones' exploitation of the family's pain by denying the tragedy to entertain his followers only adds to their suffering. It is a sickening reminder that we humans are capable of great evil. But then you hear the story of Scarlett Lewis, the mother of 6-year-old Jessie Lewis, who was one of the victims of Sandy Hook. Nobody would blame her for holding on to the anger and pain of losing her young son. But instead, she has focused on compassion and forgiveness. As she said in an interview, Adam Lanza, the shooter, did not wake up on December 14th a mass murderer. It took years of anger. She now runs a foundation dedicated to bringing programs into schools to teach children that they can choose love over anger, gratitude over entitlement, forgiveness and compassion. We humans are also capable of so much good, and this includes an incredible capacity for forgiveness, sometimes even in the face of great personal risk. It is noble and good to turn the other cheek to our enemies, but it can also come at a tremendous price, as the tragic assassination of Dr. King attests. Even so, we can forgive. But what does it mean to forgive? What is forgiveness, and what is it not? The psychologist Robert Enright is a notable researcher in the field of forgiveness, and he defines forgiveness as a willingness to abandon one's right to resentment, negative judgment, and indifferent behavior toward one who unjustly injured us, while fostering the undeserved qualities of compassion, generosity, and even love toward him or her. Another way of saying this is that forgiveness involves emotional substitution. We have to make a conscious effort to give up negative, hot emotions toward the one who hurt us, and replace them with cool emotions that are positive. It is an internal, introspective process of coming to terms with emotions we have every right to experience, and then transforming these emotions. Forgiveness is needed when we have been unjustly hurt, offended, or betrayed, and the trust relationship has been broken. We blame the wrongdoer, and we are swimming in a sea of anger, rage, resentment, and perhaps even plots of revenge. But to forgive, we must make a moral choice to cast off feelings of unforgiveness, even though the wrongdoer doesn't deserve it. We may even reach out to the wrongdoer with tentative efforts of compassion and generosity in the hope of reconciliation. This can be a difficult journey, and it may be too much to expect in some situations. What is most obviously missing from the idea of forgiveness is justice. When we abandon our right to feelings of unforgiveness, we also abandon our right to exact justice. Depending on the circumstances, the legal system or some other process might intervene and bring some degree of justice. But when we truly forgive, we must move beyond any such expectation. If we're holding out for some kind of justice, we are not ready to forgive, and that's okay. When the crime is still fresh and society needs a moral wake-up call to acknowledge the injustice, it is not yet time for forgiveness. I think of Michael Brown and the other young black men whose deaths energized the Black Lives Movement. And I think it is not yet time to abandon the thirst for justice. There are too many more lives at stake. But at some point, I hope Michael Brown's parents and the many others who grieve will be able to forgive. Forgiveness is not conciliation, condoning, or excusing the behavior of the wrongdoer, nor is it forgetting about the hurt and moving on or finding ways of justifying the injury, nor is it the legal act of pardoning an offender. It is not reconciling, and understanding the difference between forgiveness and reconciling is particularly important. Reconciling is an open process in the relationship between two or more people. Forgiveness is a personal, internal journey. While it is a necessary step on the path to reconciliation, you can forgive without ever being reconciled. In many cases, reconciliations may not even be possible. For example, if the person you have decided to forgive is no longer living. So why should we forgive the one who hurt us? What is the benefit for us? The short answer to these questions is that we might extinguish the resentments caused by the hurt. We benefit emotionally by letting go of the pain of reliving the anger over and over again. It's not about giving anything to the one who hurt us, but neither is it a truly selfish act. When we change our feelings, thoughts, and behaviors toward the offender, perhaps that will lead to reconciliation. But it is not a necessary outcome. Letting go of the negative baggage and replacing it with compassion is enough benefit on its own. Forgiveness always begins with pain, and the pain should at least be lessened. You may even begin to feel good. So how do we practice forgiveness? There are plenty of good books that offer guidance on the process of forgiveness. What I've found is that many of the frameworks outlined in these books are similar, but often one step or another receives greater emphasis. Several models seem to agree on a general 5-step process, and I personally have found this approach to be very beneficial. I'm not saying this is the only way to practice forgiveness, but it gives you some idea about what I'm talking about. So let me walk through it. The first step is to reflect deeply on the specifics of the injury. What happened, and how has that changed your life? What is the narrative of your painful experience? Often it is good to have a compassionate listener who can bear witness to your suffering. Another option is to journal and give yourself enough time to really nail this down. The next step is to recognize that forgiveness has emotional, cognitive, and behavioral dimensions. How do you feel? What do you think? How has that impacted your relationship with the one who caused the hurt? How will you act around the person once you have decided to forgive them? Again, it can be helpful to talk to someone or journal. Each step is important and should not be rushed. Third, try to empathize with the one who injured you. Empathy is probably the crucial factor in whether you can really forgive someone. If you cannot see the offender as equal to yourself in your humanity and moral uncertainty, you will not be able to forgive. Perhaps you too will feel the need for forgiveness when you begin to empathize with the offender and see the narrative from their perspective. The fourth step is making a conscious decision to forgive the transgressor, to abandon the negative feelings and the need to exact justice. This process can take a very long time as well. But the most important point is making the decision and acknowledging to yourself that you have indeed made the decision to forgive. And remember, it is okay if you're not. The final step is to internalize the meanings of the offense and how you will be transformed by the act of forgiving. When we forgive someone, we write the narrative of our injured self with this new understanding. Having said all of this, it is also important to understand that forgiveness may take multiple iterations of this process over a very, very long time. Some wounds are indeed very deep. In the Jewish tradition, for example, they allow 3 attempts by the wrongdoer to seek forgiveness before asking a rabbi to intercede. And even then, there is no requirement that forgiveness is given. Forgiveness can be a long process. And even though I've described the process as an intentional act, it can be argued that in the end, we don't so much decide to forgive as we discover that over time we have forgiven. We come to realize that we have truly integrated a new understanding into our own self-narrative and feel compassion and love for the one who hurt us. I read an article written by a hospital chaplain who described what people talk about when they're dying. He said mostly they talk about their families, about their mothers and fathers, their sons and daughters. They talk about the love they felt and the love they gave. When the love is imperfect or a family is destructive, something else can be learned: forgiveness. The spiritual work of being human is learning how to love and how to forgive. We may wrestle with questions about the meaning of life and how we fit into the great cosmic story. But in our everyday experience of living, I think it is so true that the spiritual work of being human is learning how to love and how to forgive. This is recognized by almost all the world's faith traditions and is certainly not unique to Judaism. Compassion is fundamental to Buddhist teachings, for example. And in Christian churches, it is a rare week when forgiveness is not mentioned in sermons, prayers, creeds, or in the confessional. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. In the early church, the practice of forgiveness was considered so essential to the health of the community that rules forbade anyone not reconciled with their neighbors from participating in the Eucharist meal. Practicing forgiveness promotes compassion and love, and it truly can become a regular spiritual practice, a discipline of forgiveness, as Reverend Liz describes. But like any spiritual practice worth the effort, it is a lifelong process that can be difficult at times. One theologian who has written extensively on the subject uses the analogy of learning a craft such as being a potter or a stained glass artist. It takes practice to become proficient, and fortunately, life will offer plenty of opportunities to hone your skills. Forgiveness as a spiritual practice not only heals us, but can empower us to handle incredible adversity. So in the days ahead, may you all seek to forgive and to be forgiven, if you're ready. I invite you now to rise in body or spirit and join in singing our closing hymn, number 323, Break Not the Circle.
Break not the circle of every big
a new one and a challenging one. And we don't have Jessica's lovely voice here to lead us either. So our closing words are a prayer from Ravensbrück concentration camp. It's from an unknown author who was a prisoner during the Holocaust in the Ravensbrück camp for women, where an estimated 92,000 women and children died. And when it was liberated, the following prayer was found scrawled on some wrapping paper. Lord, remember not only the men and women of goodwill, but also those of ill will. But do not only remember the suffering they inflicted upon us. Remember the fruits we have brought thanks to this suffering, our comradeship, our loyalty, our humility, our courage, our generosity, the greatness of heart which has grown out of all of this. And when they come to judgment, let all the fruits which we have borne be their forgiveness.
We will now extinguish our chalice with the following words. If you would like to join me in the recitation, they are in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Cindy, are we having coffee hour downstairs? Okay, it's time for our postlude, and please join us for coffee and conversation downstairs after the service. Be safe and be well.